Hi there, I'm Juliet Landau, and this is the Mud Talks. Today we are speaking with Dan Striepeke, who is a legend in our business. His career has spanned over 40 years, he's been nominated for 2 Academy Awards, and he's done it all, from being studio makeup department head to Tom Hanks' personal. So here we go, talking to Dan Striepeke.
I was born in Santa Rosa, California, in, I hate to say, 1930, height of the Depression, and grew up mainly on a farm. And then there was a dissolution in the family, and by the time I'm 14, 1944, we're kind of destitute, and I'm looking for a way to make some money to help support my mother and my brothers. There was 3 brothers. And so I went to work for the California Division of Forestry. And they made a policy of looking the other way about hiring these young boys because there were no men around to fight wildfires like what we're seeing today. So I spent several summers fighting fire, and kind of grew into young manhood. And I had one particularly terrible thing happen. The first year I worked there, I was put on a fire truck as a hose man, and we went out to this airplane fire because it was an air base just north of Santa Rosa, training pilots for combat. So they'd come out of basic training and then go into these hot fighter planes, and they were crashing all over the place. Anyway, this was a P-38 fighter, which Lockheed had built, and it was a twin boom thing with a horizontal elevator. Anyway, we got there, and I get up and I start spraying the plane, and there's the pilot's body, and it's headless. And we finally get the fire under control, and my crew boss, who comes up in another truck just after that, he sees where the head is, and he sends me over to get a bucket and go over and pick up the head. So I'm 14, so that's my introduction to firefighting. So it shook me to my roots, but that's what happens. You grow up pretty quick. There was a picture called Shadow of a Doubt, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it was shot in Santa Rosa. Hitchcock liked that little town. He did The Birds out at Bodega Bay, and he liked that countryside up there. So anyway, I'd go after school. I'd go over there to McDonald Avenue, which is where the house was in the picture, and watch. And I was fascinated by it, And I met the makeup artist who had time to talk to me, and so. It piqued my interest, and of course I wanted to get the hell out of Santa Rosa, to be very frank with you. And so he said, well, why don't you write Max Factor? And they have a program of pamphlets and dramatic director makeup boxes you can buy, and so I did. And so I started self-teaching from these booklets. They had booklets on Shakespeare, on all the great dramas and stuff like that. So, and I started learning how to do beard work and nose putty. In those days, wasn't appliances. It was nose putty and making false noses or cauliflower ears or whatever you're doing. So I basically was training myself. In 1948, I'm a senior in high school, and I've come a long way because I win a national speech contest in Akron, Ohio. And the town had sent myself as well as the other 2 contestants and their parents around the country. Anyway, we get back to Santa Rosa, and there's a restaurant there called the Pump Room, which was fashioned after the Pump Room, the famous Pump Room in Chicago. And it was a Skirball, Jack Skirball was a producer in Hollywood. He had a big ranch up there. So my drama teacher, my mother, and the other 2 students and their parents, went out to dinner. And while we're having dinner, there's 3 men in a booth next to ours. And one was Lloyd Nolan, who I recognized, the actor, and Patrick Knowles, the actor. And the man sitting with him got up and went to the men's room, and I got up and I followed him. So we're standing there doing what we're doing, and he said, "You people should be proud of yourself, what you've done," you know. And I said, "Well, yeah, but I said, I want to be a makeup artist." He said, "You do?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, why don't you write me a letter?" And he says, "I'll see what I can do to help you out." His name was Charlie Truzona. He was he was an agent. And so me and my naivete, I wrote him a letter. And sure enough, within about 30 days, I got an answer. And he said, "I have an appointment with Ern Westmore at Eagle Lion Studios, and come on down." So my mother and I drove down in our old car, and I had 3 weeks at Eagle Lion with Mr. Westmore and his brother Frank, who was much younger, of course. And they showed me everything: hair, prosthetics, ball caps, you know, aging, beauty, makeup, everything. I had privy to everything. So at the end of the 2 weeks, he said, "You continue doing your work and take pictures of it." And I had a friend whose father had a photo studio in Santa Rosa. So I do makeups at home and get kids and my mother or other adults and do makeups on them and have pictures taken professionally, and then send them. He'd send them back with, you know, color or Crayola markings saying you did this wrong or that wrong. So that's how I basically got taught the basics of the artistry. And I worked hard at it. I really did. So I hope I'm not boring. So anyway, in 1949, early 49, I couldn't take Santa Rosa anymore. I just couldn't take it. So another friend of mine, Tom Rivard, his father owned the photo studio. We took off and went to Mexico, and came back to LA, and Tom went home, and I said, "I'm staying. I'm either going to make it or I'm, you know." So I'm sleeping in my car. I've got about $60 to my name. And finally I landed a job at Bullock's Pasadena, unpacking better women's sportswear, women's better sportswear. So I got a job. So when on Saturday morning, I still don't understand how or why this happened. On a Saturday morning, I'm in my car and I'm driving south on La Cienega Boulevard. Now I come from Pasadena. And I still to this day don't know quite how that happened. And as I'm driving down La Cienega Boulevard, there's a building on the right side, just north of where Norm's restaurant is now. And it was called the Fabulous Invalid, the Civic Playhouse, soon to open with the play The Fabulous Invalid by Moss Hart. And I had done the play in high school. And it was about the decline of the American theater. Takes it off in its heyday, and Louie Waldheim and all the Barrymores and John Gielgud, not Gielgud, but anyway, all the greats. And then it just slowly deteriorates and becomes a burlesque house. So I pull into the parking lot and get out of my car, and I see a door, and I go in, and the place is pitch black, and they're in rehearsal. So I sneak in and sit in a chair and watch, and pretty soon they're finished, and the lights come up, and I spotted the director. So I go over to him and I said, my name, and I said, "You need a makeup artist for this, and I've done the play, and I know the play, so I'm your guy." So he calls an actor out on the stage, and he said, "Make him look like Louie Waldheim." Now, Louie Waldheim played the wonderful role of Katz in All's Quiet on the Western Front. Big, Germanic. He was like a predecessor of Victor McLaglen, so to speak. So I run out to my car, I get my makeup boxes, and go back into a dressing room and I make up this guy. Probably the worst thing that's ever been done in the area of the artistry of makeup. I bring him out in the footlights, in front of the footlights, and the director says, "You're hired." So I'm working 3 nights a week, $20 a night, But I'm working. And I'm also working in Bullocks Pasadena. So that's how I got my start. Anyway, the play ran for, I think it was a non-equity show. It ran for about 3 weeks. And toward the end of the run, I approached Mr. Clare, the director, and he's also one of the founders of KTTV. And I asked him if there's any place I could get a job in town. He said, well, let me see what I can do. Well, the next weekend, we're doing the play again, and he says, hey, I got an interview for you over at KTTV. So naturally, I go to the interview, and I get the job. I get a job as a makeup artist, working on something, the Buster Keaton Show, which was filmed at the old Decca Records building on Melrose. And also, I Love a Mystery, Glenn Langdon and Del Jurgens, and minstrels, McMahon's minstrels, all of the schlocky stuff too, and newscasters. But I'm working, and I'm making, so I quit Bullocks, of course. And so now it's 1950, and I'm in hog heaven, And my friend, Tom Rivard, comes down and sees me. And I said, what's up? And he says, I'm going to the Air Force. I said, what are you talking about? And this is the Korean War. And he said, well, we're in the next draft call in Santa Rosa, and I'm not going in the infantry, get my ass shot off, So within a week, I went down to the Motor Day building and I enlisted. There was only 4 in the call in Santa Rosa, and I was one of them. Anyway, so I spent 4 years in the military, and came out and wanted to go back to work, and KTTV didn't want me, and I got angry. So I went to the U.S. Attorney's office in downtown and told them my story, and of course they loved it, and within a week I was working at KTTV. The gentleman who had my job while I was in the service, they gave him a 30-day vacation, and I worked my 30 days under his Taft-Hartley law and got my union card. And I never looked back, so from then on. From there, so much in life is timing. Motion pictures were nascent. People were not going to theaters. Theaters were small, the pictures were small, the topics were small. They hadn't gone to big screen or big sound yet. And they were contracting because the people weren't going. It's like what's happening in the movie business today. So things were really tight. Then when I got out of the military in 1954, October, all of a sudden Hollywood started waking up. They had developed CinemaScope and widescreen, and VistaVision and big sound, and rebuilding theaters, and now all of a sudden they're making product that require big stories for big. So here is Giant, 10 Commandments, Kismet, all these were going into production. Now the makeup local was made up of mainly 70-year-old men. There were no women, believe me, but 70-year-old men. So they couldn't staff the pictures. 10 Commandments alone, like the brick pit sequence, there were 60 makeup artists working on that. And because DeMille insisted that the beards be put on individually, laid on individually. So there's 60 jobs right there. And then Kismet with the big, stylized Arabic beards and all that sort of thing, and wigs, and town just went crazy. And then Giant opened it, came back from Texas to the studio. That was all aging. So just the demand for makeup artists was unbelievable. So I went to work in the movies. I left KTTV and never looked back. It was amazing. And so And then when the things did cool off about a year later, I went to work at NBC, and I was doing Tennessee Ernie Ford show, and did that for a year, I think it was. And then, but also during that time, there was 80 Days Around the World, for instance. We'd have 40, 50, 60 makeup artists that they had the little bamboo shoots on their noses and everything. And it was such a fertile field at that time as a makeup artist, was really euphoric, you know, because you had a lot of demand. There were a lot of ball caps and the bamboo noses on, you know, you had a lot of demands. You could exercise your art, you know. And I went after it with gusto and developed my skills. And I'd been working in film and like 55, 10 Commandments, etc., and running, you know, a day check person, you know, a daily employee. And that work dried up, and I took an interview at NBC, and Fred Williams was the department head there at the time, and Claude Thompson was assistant department head, and they had brought John in to broaden the scope of the makeup department, make it into more important because of the sculpture and that sort of thing. And so anyway, they hired me, and they put me on the Pinky Lee show, and John was doing the Pinky Lee show at Burbank. It was a daytime hour comedy show for kids, you know. Pinky Lee, oh, my name is Pinky Lee, you know, so, and Mr. Grumpy and all that sort of thing. So John and I did the first year there, you know, 5 days a week, close, and we became very close. John took care of my first child, or John and Joan took care of my first child while my second was being born in Burbank. And we were family, you know, we were just very, very close. And I dearly loved the man. And I think he liked me, and we had a great rapport. And John could be very testy at times, as we know, but fair. He was always fair. And I never challenged his ability, you know, that sort of thing, nor did I even think of such, you know. He was a real talented man, very talented man. And he was Irish, and he had a temper. But I loved him dearly. And we were able to collaborate very closely. And what we did at NBC, we, you know, years later refined and moved on, you know, into bigger and better things. I came in after John had done the preliminaries, and because the laboratory in existence at Fox Makeup at that time failed miserably on the characterization, and they shot film on it, and it was so John was brought in from Spain. He was doing the Robert Culp series. They had some interesting makeup on it, and they brought John to Spain to do it. So then he finished that, and he flew back to Hollywood and went to work at Fox. And he got they gave him a little cubby hole, you know. And it was huge, you know, because Planet of the Apes, nothing like it had ever been done. I have the interview with Ben Nye, who I'd worked for on Sound of Music, and I did another Picture Wake Me When It's Over with Ernie Kovacs at Fox. So that was my only connection there at the time. And so I had the interview with Ben, and then I had an interview with Stan Huff, who was head of production, and then Doc Merman, who would be the immediate supervisor. And they already had a makeup artist who had done his apprenticeship there. Nice man, a very, very good makeup artist. However, John kept insisting that I'm the guy to do it, and I'm the organizer type, and I can keep the thing going because it's all new ground, you know. So it finally prevailed, and I went to work at Fox, and I had just finished the series Mission Impossible, and I went to work at Fox, and oh my God, I lost all my hair. I mean, it was enormous, groundbreaking, you know, stuff that had never been done before, and the mold making and the laboratory work and the sculpture and the hair for the arms and the faces and the wigs and the teeth, and I mean, every facet of this business was used, and maybe some that haven't been used since, you know. But it was an amazing effort, and I remember we were one appliance, two appliances, the chin as well as the upper face, on Roddy McDowell. We had one extra on him, and some makeup artist, and I won't reveal his name, stole it, went out to the valley, and played hero, showing all these people how great he was about this makeup, which he had nothing to do with except, you know, do A, B, B, C, D, you know. Well, I finally found out and I fired him. And I mean, those kind of things happened. I mean, it just was insane, you know. You know, I'd have 50, 60, like in the cornfield sequence, I'd have 65 makeup artists working every day. So we didn't have facilities for them. And I got the idea to get a couple of construction trailers and sent them down to the mill and had them build them into makeup and hairdressing facilities. So we could go out to the ranch, the Fox Ranch, where we have the facilities to do all the work. And then when we moved the company back to the studio, the trailers would come in and be parked and hooked up to electrical and water, and we could operate. So all that had to be done from scratch, you know. And I had a wonderful wig maker. Her name was Josephine Turner, God rest her soul. And I had met her at Max Factor originally, and she was wonderful. And she ran the whole building, the wigs and the facial hair pieces and the hands and all the rest. Enormous job. I had like 6 or 8 women working, just ventilating, you know, hair into hair lace. So all that, but John and I were close friends and great believers in one another, and we pulled it off. Dick Zanuck called myself and John into his office one day, and he said, Dan, you're the department head, and normally the credit goes to the department head. In those days, that was de rigueur, you know. I said, well, I'm trying to change that because I want the man who's responsible to get the credit, you know, which is deserve it. Because I looked at credits over the years, and you never saw anybody but Perce Westmore or Ern Westmore or Bill Tuttle or something. Not that they didn't deserve it, but the people who did the work deserved it also. So Zanuck says, well, the Academy only allows one, because this was before there was a category. And I said, well, there's no question about it. John, you know, he created this. So John won the Academy Award because of that. I mean, because of his work, you know, and rightly so. And that was the end of that. But it was a wonderful moment, really, because, you know, the art of makeup had not really been recognized. And what's depressing to me today is that you see makeup artists and hairstylists listed below craft service or you know, the guy who pours the water on the ditch or something. But I mean, it's terrible. Makeup credits used to always be before titles or right after titles in the front of the picture. And now they're buried. And I don't know what's happened, but it just makes me angry. Because the reason for it, as I say, is because you want to be substantive about what the content of a movie is. And like a Planet of the Apes, my God, there's no movie without it. Now, well, of course, now with CGI, that's kind of all unfortunately gone, you know. That'll never happen again, you know. But anyway, that's just the way things go. Right, I went to work for Bud Westmore at Universal, running the laboratory and making the noses for Sir Laurence Olivier and all the blood and the body makeup and all the Woody Parfrey body and all the rest of it in the lab at Universal. And I had 10 months of just absolute wonderment, you know, and wonderful freedom of creating things. And without being tied down on the set, I wasn't on the set, I was in the lab. So from that, a gentleman came through Universal one day and he was having a meeting with Bud Westmore about something. And Bud called upstairs to the lab and says, come down here, I want you to meet somebody. So I came downstairs and I met a gentleman by the name of Emil Levine. I don't know if you know of Emil Levine. Lavigne, Lavigne. He came out of MGM. He was actually the heir apparent to become the department head. It was between him, Bill Tuttle, and Bill Tuttle won. So, very, very creative man, amazingly creative. So he, by this time in his career, he's older, but he's been hired by the Mirisch Company to do all their films. So, you know, I was in awe of him because he was a very, very fine artist. Emil Levine was the type of man who would not come over and say, do this or do that. He let you exercise your artistry, and he encouraged that, which unfortunately a lot of people don't do that. They want to keep their thumbprint in. He never was that way. He was always, he gave me such free rein, and I don't know, it was a beautiful thing. And for instance, they had to say at the union, no MGM, no Universal, and no Emil Levine, because he was a taskmaster. He really was. He took a liking to me, and without seeing me work or anything, and I guess on the advice of Bud Westmore, he hired me to go to Mexico with him on the Magnificent Seven as his second man. Now, so anyway, I wound up doing McQueen and Brad Dexter and I don't know how many, you know, others. And Emil was doing Yul Brynner and Eli Wallach, and we had a lot of work to do. We had 12 stuntmen, which one day would be bearded Mexican banditos, the next day they'd be cowboys, you know, and they're back and forth, back and forth. I don't know. I used to. As a kid, I did puppet shows, so I loved carving puppets and doing that. And that's kind of an adjunct to the whole thing, you know. And I like to study life. I love to study faces, and you can get a lot of inspiration out of that. Well, I originally met Paul Newman when we were doing a Lux Video Theater at NBC called The Battler. It was a Hemingway story. It was about an old fighter, you know, and then you go back in the story and there's this beautiful, beautiful young man. And of course, Newman was a beautiful young man. And John and myself and 3 others, we had like a minute 45 during a commercial to do these changes. So there's all these hands in there pounding for you know. So when I'm doing the picture with Tom Hanks in Chicago, Road to Perdition, Paul comes in, he's gonna work that night, and he wants to get made up in his trailer. So okay, so I go over to his trailer. He says, I want you to know, he says, you know, I'm good at this racket. And he says, if you make any mistakes, I'm going to let you have it. Yeah. And I said, I remember you when we did The Battler at NBC. And I said, I know a hell of a lot more about this than you do about acting, so shut up. And he looked at me like, and Paul and I became great friends. And we had a great time throughout the picture. I've never seen such chemistry in my life between Anne Margaret and him. It was absolutely electric. And of course, George Sidney had directed her in the first movie she made. And he's following them around at night in Las Vegas, snapping pictures. He's a picture freak. And Elvis finally picked him up and put him against the wall. His feet were that far off the ground. And he's going to put him right through the wall.
Did he stop?
He stopped. He did stop. I did The Boston Strangler with Tony. I was head of the makeup department, but they insisted, Tony insisted that I come in. And so I'd go to stage 5 every day into his dressing room and make him up with this nose, and then turn it over to Jack Barron or somebody else to stand by. And of course, I had him at Universal also on The Outsider when he played the Indian, Ira Hayes. And I had a falling out with Bud Westmore, and Tony asked me to do 40 Pounds of Trouble. I had done Taurus Bulba with him, you know, and the Indian, the Ira Hayes story. So anyway, I didn't want to work in the makeup department at Universal.
Right.
So I got an okay for the mill to build me this unit with big wheels, and they towed it around, and the doors would open, and it'd be big full-length mirrors. Wow. And I had electrical, and so it could hook up to use an iron or whatever. So we had a makeup department very mobile on the lot. In the Outsider with Tony Curtis, he had a trailer, which they had set up a makeup room in the trailer. And the makeup artist that was doing the work got fired. And there was a nose, which I had sculpted and made in the laboratory. And I got a call on a Sunday from Marshall Green, who was head of production at Universal at the time. And he said, we need you in Glendale on Sunday, tomorrow morning, to make up Tony, because the man I won't mention. And so I went over, and Tony and I had known each other, you know, quite well. And so I did the makeup in probably an hour and 10. He says, my God, it's been 2.5 hours getting me ready before. Where the hell have you been? I said, where the hell have you been? And we went ahead and did the picture and finished it, you know, with the full wig and the dark Indian makeup and the nose and the pale blue eyes.
Right. Wow.
Of course. Tony was a great guy, and he was a great athlete. Yul Brynner had a most magnificent stallion when we were doing Taurus Bulba, doing these long running shots, you know, with the camera on the back of a pickup truck and going full speed. And 700 riders. And, you know, if you're up in the front and you fall, all 700 is going to run over you, you know. And Tony stayed right in there. He was great, you know, and they had the scalp locks, of course, when the men lost their freedom.
Right.
That was a big makeup show.
Yeah.
It doesn't show, but it nor should it, you know. But all those actors knew instinctively when you were doing right.
Right.
And they knew instinctively when you were doing wrong.
Right.
Because most of them had stage training, were making themselves up on the stage. So they knew their faces, they knew what they could do and what they couldn't. Well, Gene Kelly was just a monumentally wonderful man, you know, and it was great, and we had great rapport. Barbara was fine. I did probably 4 or 5 tests with her and she was not easy. No, but she wasn't terrible. I mean, she wasn't antagonistic. She was just wanted it right. And we tested and we tested and we finally got textures and colors that looked good on her, you know, and then the rest is history on the film. There were so many wonderful films at that time. And the design on George C. Scott, which a lot of people don't realize, Scott had a nose that went forever this way and kept dipping down. It wasn't a patrician nose like Patton had, who was very proud of his nose. So I came up with the idea of taking some muslin de soie, which is very fine lace, and pinking it, and then gluing it under the proboscis, and then pulling it up, and then gluing it down, and sealer over the top of that, and then makeup to hide it. And it worked, you know. Because there's a line in the picture, he says, I don't like the idea of a bullet coming toward my nose, or something like that. So George was wonderful, and Del Esfito, who was one of my key guys, did him throughout that picture, and he did a beautiful job on him in Spain. I had a meeting with Mr. Altman one day in his office, which was right opposite, across the street from the commissary at Fox. And he says, you know, he says, I don't believe in movie blood. I said, oh, what would you like, pig, calf, camel? He looked at me like I had 5 heads, you know. I said, well, they don't work because they coagulate and they turn black and blah, 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 blah. I said, I'll bring you 4 samples of blood on 4 identical surfaces, and you pick it if you know. So we mixed it up and, you know, took it up to him, and of course he picked the wrong color. I said, that's not going to photograph very well. So anyway, the blood was okay, and we got along. I had an interesting thing with blood with Steven Spielberg on Saving Private Ryan. And it's a scene where Tom Hanks is under the water, and there's blood in the water. And so they had dug a big hole and filled it with water, and now we're going to put Hanks in there with a bunch of other soldiers and the blood. They put the blood in, there's no blood. There's no blood. There's no opacity to it. You know, it's a dye. You know, you see right through it. So everybody's staring around. And then this multi-million-dollar production with all this stuff and all these jabronis standing around, what do we do now, you know? And Lois Burwell, God rest her soul. Do you know Lois? Yes. Yeah. She turned to me and I said, put some milk in it, which I had done before on other things. So they hurried up and got a quart of milk, and and Spielberg looked over at me, you son of a bitch. I got you. Stephen, by the way, was wonderful to work with. He really was. Always been a big fan of his. And Richard Benjamin asked me to do My Favorite Year. And, you know, there's a great line in there where I'm not a movie star, I'm an actor, or I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star, or something like that. So Peter, you know, he had to have the patina and the whole 9 yards of a old decaying actor, you know, so to speak. And he was wonderful. He was absolutely fabulous. Olivier, you know, none better. You know, good actors are good actors, period, you know. You know, the art of makeup is so, not only revelatory, but it gives one such a feeling of accomplishment when you pull off the gag, you know. Now, for instance, on Hanks, for instance, on Castaway, we're about 4 degrees above the equator, and he is basically only on the loincloth. And you'll be out there 10 minutes and you're burned, you know. I mean, really. And so I had to SPF him. I had to lather him up, of course, which degraded the makeup. And I had to cover the bottoms of his feet with prosthetics so he could walk on the coral. And it was a nightmare. He would get 3 shots and he'd be back in the chair, start all over again. And do 3 shots and back in the chair. He never got to sleep. I never got to sleep. But so you come back into what we call a brewery or a bungalow, and 3 of us would jump on him, and he just the poor man just never got rest, But God love him, he had discipline. So it was a real test. All of his pictures, Forrest Gump was a real test. The studio didn't have a lot of faith in that picture. And so they had a real attenuated schedule. And of course, the director wanted these running sequences to give him transitions, time transitions, And so we'd finish shooting on a, on a Saturday night, and then go to Savannah, get on a airplane, scratch crew, and go to Maine, for instance, and get there in the middle of the night. I'd be with my makeup chair, ready to do them at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm a believer in laying the beard, not hair lace. I don't like it because it constricts the face, and I like it to be alive, to be real. So I'm laying this hair on, I prepare it, I'd lay it, and curl it, and it's gnarly and dirty, and but it worked. It worked, and so it was a hard picture, very hard picture. Long hours, and Mr. Zemeckis and I had a fight the first day of the film. He was going to fire me, and at times I said I wish he had, but we became quite good friends, and he gave me a part in the picture. And I played one of Bear Bryant's assistants and telling Forrest to run, you dumb son of a bitch, run. Anyway, Forrest Gump was difficult, really hard, and but I think the results were good, and I got nominated for it, so that made me happy. This man, Tom Hanks, I worked with a lot of actors in my life, and he absolutely tears above all of them. And I don't mean to denigrate any of them, but they're all great. But he is just superb. He's also, what people don't realize, probably one of the funniest men I've ever met in my life. He's the only one I've ever met who could put Robin Williams on the floor and keep him there. And Robin would be crying, let me up, and he'd nail him with those zinger. Fastest thing I've ever seen in my life. But really a good guy. I'll give you a little story. I hear that Tom is going out to Burbank to see these people about motion capture. So I get a little devious about this, and so I drive out to the place in Burbank. Excuse me. And I come into the makeup trailer, and I see this guy just about to start putting these dots on Tom's face. And I take my hand, I go like this, and I wipe it off his face, and I knock the tweezers out of his hand. I said, this will not happen here as long as I'm alive. So big hullabaloo, big blah, blah, blah. I said, you're not putting that stuff on my actor's eyes. And I turned to Tom and I said, you hear me? And he said, yeah, boss, yeah. Because I was really irate. I really was irate. Because I had plans for that, how to do that picture. And with all the dots, it had to be done every day. So I needed a crew of about 12 makeup artists to do that. And of course, the company wanted to do it with 2, and that didn't jive. And that was Mr. Zemeckis again, and he and his guy and myself had a couple big, and I won. Well, the picture speaks for itself, but anyway, that's just the way it goes in this town, Off the top of my head, I'll say this. I find some good work. I find a lot of bad work, a lot of over-the-top work, and in particular, hair work. Whether it be a mustache. For instance, I was watching a foreign film. I'm on the Foreign Film Commission at the Academy, and I'm watching a picture about this Mexican fighter. He had 18 knockouts in a row. The world record, which he still holds. Anyway, he's dead now. But in the film, he had a little chin beard, a little bumper here, and there's a shine. Every damn shot there was a shine. You don't have shine. There's no excuse for it, except sloppiness. And on the cameraman's part, on the makeup artist's part, on the director, everybody, even the editors. I mean, they should have. And of course, your eye goes right to it. In my eye, anyway. I think the art has suffered, and it's all industrial revolution, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I mean, CGI. It's killed the makeup business. Really has. Oh, hair lace shows. Oh, well, we'll take care of it. I see hair lace all the time when I'm watching film. There's no excuse for it. But the excuse is, oh well, they'll CGI it out.
Right.
And that one thing, one piece of mediocrity leads to another, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know what? Every movie I've done, there was a big slice of me in the movie, and that I always felt like I never held back. I give it everything I had, and if there wasn't enough, then so be it. But get somebody else. But that's the way I approached it. I think there's always the thing, whether you're in the motion picture industry or whether you're making candy or I don't care what it is. Do the very best you can do, and things will take care of themselves. But when you're slovenly and cut corners and try to cheat and yada, 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 you're never going to succeed. Might be for a moment or two, but you're not going to have staying power. Having this wonderful opportunity in this wonderful business and not being in the dirt picking prunes, I was forever, and still am forever, thankful for what happened to me.